The Vietnam War was and continues to be perhaps the most controversial war in U.S. history. Many people believe this war was necessary as a preemptive strike against the communist threat, and that if America had neglected to respond to the Viet Cong and Viet Minh incursion on democratic soil, America would have lost the Cold War. However, many other people believe that the war was brutal, unnecessary, and a complete and awful waste of money, time, and especially human life. But was the Vietnam War just? First, some background. The region where Vietnam is located was controlled by France as part of French Indochina since the late 1800s, up until the Japanese occupied it during World War II. After Japan's grisly defeat, France resumed full control of Vietnam. However, weakened severely by the war, France was viewed as a weak target by the leader of a communist band of rebels, Ho Chi Minh. Minh used his superior tactical prowess, gained by studying America's military history and American technology stolen during the Korean War, to defeat France in a long fight for freedom. Culminating in the remarkable Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, this conflict proved a resounding success for the Viet Minh, Ho Chi Minh's forces. However, during this fight, another force had emerged in the proclaimed South Vietnam under the French-educated Emperor Bao. Seeking to alleviate the conflict, the Geneva Convention declared Vietnam to be split along the 17th parallel, with elections for reunification planned in 1956. In 1955, however, the aggressively anti-communist Ngo Dinh Diem seized control of South Vietnam and the war began anew. This marks the beginning of direct American involvement in the war in Vietnam. America did aid the French against the Viet Minh with supplies and ammunition, but never with troops or tactical personnel. However, because the policy of containing communism on all fronts was popular in America, when the Viet Minh became a serious threat, America decided to intervene. First, America sent primarily tactical advisors, but a staggering number of them, 16,000 by 1963. Then, 2 American ships were attacked and destroyed by Viet Minh submarines in the Gulf of Tonkin, prompting American retaliation. This came in the form of a law passed by Congress known as the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which gave the president full power in a war concerning military action. Every president afterwards until the end of the Vietnam War used this to their full advantage, sending more and more troops until, at the height of the war, there were over 500,000 American troops in Vietnam. The war, however, was immensely unpopular. The rising popularity of television led to gruesome scenes of violence appearing on the evening news in front of families at the dinner table. This, coupled with the unpopularity of the draft and the constant flow of soldiers leaving and never returning, led to massive protests and major controversy. The American government was at first able to temper the flame with promises of sure victory, but this facade of superiority was shattered with the Tet Offensive launched by the Communist forces on January 31st, 1968. Launched on the Vietnamese holiday of Tet, the Lunar New Year, the Tet Offensive was the most devastating battle of the war. The Communists showed their true superiority by attacking over 100 targets, including the South Vietnamese capital, Saigon. This was the beginning of the end for the democratic forces in Vietnam. Within 3 years, conscription in America had ended. Within 4, America had left the war. The war changed America forever. The cost of the war and the ensuing inflations had a devastating impact on the economy. Fuel prices were especially affected. The Vietnam War ended the idea of America as an invincible superpower. The world knew that America could lose. Because of an isolated group of soldiers' atrocities against the people of Vietnam, returning veterans were hated as opposed to revered for the first time in American history. America today is still reeling from the war. It left veterans homeless, reputations tarnished, the news industry with an obligation to censor its content, the economy unsteady, and the nation as a whole vulnerable. But those are the facts. What do they mean as far as the justification of the war goes? Let's find out. The cause of the Vietnam War relies on the so-called domino theory, the idea that if even one nation fell to communism, all would fall in its wake. This prompted the anti-communist nations, especially America, to fight communism on all fronts to contain communism. While this theory proved untrue, due to the fact that even though Vietnam became fully communist, we still live in a capitalist society, this was a legitimate fear of the American government at the time. Because the Vietnam War was a preemptive strike against a threat, America had the right to it. Since this was to prevent the imminent doom of the innocent people of capitalist society, the Vietnam War meets this tenet. The Viet Minh in this conflict suffered great injustice at the hands of America. Solely because of its affiliation with America's enemy, communism, it became a target of a massive war against one of the greatest powers on Earth. Therefore, America's injustice against the Viet Minh loses the Vietnam War this tenet. Under the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, the Vietnam War was legally declared. Also, because the force against the communists in Vietnam was an international force, this war was approved internationally. As one of the two great superpowers of the time, America had a great probability of success in Vietnam. Therefore, it had rights to attempt the war. Because of America's support of No Ding Diem in this war, as opposed to supporting the democratic process and allowing the election planned in the Geneva Convention, America did not exhaust every attempt at a diplomatic and peaceful resolution to this conflict. Therefore, this tenet is not met. Because of America's confidence in victory over the Viet Minh and the potentially alleviated threat it posed, the Vietnam War meets this tenet. The conduct of the American soldiers in Vietnam War was, for the most part, appropriate. Wherever possible, with few exceptions, the American troops attempted to avoid involving innocent civilians, and never in the conflict were weapons of mass destruction or evil tactics used. The American military acted with civility and poise at the war's end. A diplomatic solution was reached with the Viet Minh, and, with a few rogue exceptions, the American troops left Vietnam peacefully. In all, the war in Vietnam cannot be considered just. While conduct during and after the war was rightfully done, America had no right to wage war against a foe, innocent save for their system of government. Yes, the American people were scared of encroaching communism, but that gives them no right whatsoever to kill people who want nothing more than what America itself wanted 200 years before: independence and the right to govern themselves as they see fit. Therefore, no. The Vietnam War was a war born out of malice and wrong intent, never justice.